Did President Trump have a secret plot against Republican Senator Thom Tillis? I am Reese Black, and this is Filibusted Headlines, and I'm joined today by my brother Troy, and we're going to be discussing this. So stick around and find out the drama and the intrigue. Play that.
Sorry, I cut you off, man. Play that
The intro video. I love that intro video. That little riff gets me going. Okay, here we go. So our topic of today, the headline of today, is about North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis. So he recently had over the weekend an interesting rift and between him and President Trump. And so what occurred essentially was Senator Tillis and in tandem with Senator Rand Paul both proclaimed recently that they would be voting no on President Trump's tax bill, his big, beautiful bill that's scheduled to be finalized this Wednesday. And as I know it, as far as I know, these are only two Republican senators who have voted no on the bill so far. And so the Senate has been frantically pushing through the bill, trying to reach that looming deadline and working through the weekend. And on Saturday night, a vote was held to start the debate on the bill, and it narrowly passed, with both of the aforementioned Republican senators voting no on starting the debate. So Tillis also announced on Sunday, the next day, that he would not be seeking re-election. I think they'll have this post here by Trump in a second. He would not be seeking re-election. And this came after a little bit of a threat, a veiled threat from President Trump, who posted on Truth Social. I have it pulled up right here. He said, numerous people have come forward wanting to run in the primary against Senator Thom Tillis. I will be meeting with them over the next coming weeks, looking for someone who will properly represent the great people of North Carolina, and so importantly, the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And so essentially, he votes against Trump's bill. Trump says, all right, we're going to replace you with somebody else come the next primary. And then Tillis goes ahead and calls it quit on the following day, saying, I'm just not going to run for re-election. And so at age 64, Tillis claims his reasoning for stepping out of the race is to spend more time with his family, with an additional suggestion that he could do more for the people of North Carolina out of the Senate, I guess. But he did not specify what doing more looked like at this time. Shortly after the announcement, President Trump posted to Truth Social saying it was great news. And so that was, I guess, predictably the outcome that Trump wanted. If you believe in coincidence, the story ends here. However, there's a fascinating history that we're going to get into for some maybe behind the scene reasons as to what's really going on here and why Tillis was just pushed out of the Senate.
Man,
so,
I didn't know he was 64. For some reason, when I see pictures of him, I thought he was older than that. And so learning now that he was 64, it makes me think even more so that Trump really was the 100% of the reason that he's leaving, like instead of just, I was thinking about it anyways,
Yeah, I mean, it is like technically retirement age, but not for the Senate.
The senators, they stick around a long time typically, and I don't know, maybe he's,
Yeah, senators usually they usually try to stick around as long as they possibly can, and I mean, it's just the politics. I mean, Trump is, I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth. He's like 79 right now.
Yeah, I think so. 79.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So like, yeah. I mean, it's not like he's not politics retirement age, maybe private sector retirement age, but yeah. So let's get into why did he do this? Why did President Trump potentially push him out? Well, it is likely has a lot to do with his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. And we're going to get into this. So in an interesting contrast, President Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, had her eyes on the Senate seat for North Carolina, which is, I don't know if I mentioned this, Tillis is North Carolina. He's a senator of North Carolina, back in 2021. The then Senator Richard Burr was also not seeking re-election, and he's since retired. But rumors went wild at the idea that Lara Trump would run, with many Republicans speculating on the idea, right? And so North Carolina GOP chairman said concerning Lara Trump's potential, if Lara were to get in the race, I think she would command widespread and immediate attention across the state. And suddenly, Lara Trump officially pulled her name out of the bucket and saying that she would not run, but instead focus on being a mother and a wife. So this was back in 2021. And then
so she was going to run potentially, and then she decided not to.
Yeah, potentially could run. It was more, from what I know, it was more rumors. I mean, she never said I'm going to run, but it just kind of, I don't know if it just kind of like snowballed of like maybe she was considering it and that kicked it off, or maybe people just really wanted her to run. I don't know, but she pulled her name out and said, no, I'm not going to run. And then President Trump confirmed the dropout, saying, people talk about nepotism. We're going to talk about nepotism today. We're going to talk a lot about nepotism, but getting into that. Sorry, still quoting President Trump. He said she could have run for the Senate in North Carolina. Ted Budd would be the first one to say, and would be the first one to say, and he wouldn't have run. Nobody would have run. And she just said, no, I want to really focus on my children. So basically saying that she would have won, but nobody else would have run against her, and she would have just taken it. Ted Budd was the guy who ran instead in one place, and he won the seat in 2022. Okay, so a few years later, just fast forward to 2024, President Trump reignited the idea of a Lara Trump as a senator, but this time in Florida. So that's what this article I have pulled up here is about. Another Trump on the ballot. Lara Trump eyes. Oh, that's the North Carolina Senate seat. Let's jump to the next one. Lara Trump says she's removing herself from consideration to be Florida senator. All right, so let's talk about her short stint as potentially the next Florida.
So the plot is thickening here.
The plot is thickening. The plot is thickening. All right. So we're first North Carolina. Now she's from North Carolina, apparently. So the Florida one is a little different because she would have had to move to Florida to then be the senator of Florida, and that's not where she's from. And so that's a little bit of a weird scenario. But I guess probably not unheard of. It's legal. It's possible. But this is what happened. So Senator Marco Rubio, everybody knows, he had to vacate his seat because he became the Secretary of State. And when he became the Secretary of State, it was rumored that President Trump pressed Governor DeSantis to nominate Lara for the seat, because Governor DeSantis has, I'm saying his name wrong, Governor DeSantis has the power to backfill, basically. He gets to nominate the backfill.
So when Rubio got removed from the Senate in Florida because he was moving up to Secretary of the State, DeSantis was going to replace him with somebody.
Yes. DeSantis got the pick of who to replace him with. Okay. And so the rumor was that Trump said, hey, DeSantis, pick my daughter-in-law, pick Lara. She'll do great. As she was at the time the Republic Convention chair leader. She was the leader of the Republican Convention, Republican National Convention, the RNC. So the news coverage at the time seemed to only be reporting anonymous sources on the inside, anonymous sources who claimed that President Trump pressured DeSantis on the Lara decision. So I don't know if that's 100% true. I don't know if that actually happened, but there was anonymous sources that were claiming this happened.
Interesting.
And Trump actually came out and denied the allegations, and he said it was not true. Here's a quote. Here's a quote from Trump being asked if he thought DeSantis would pick Lara Trump for Senate. President Trump replied, "No, I don't. I probably don't, but I don't know. Ron's doing a good job. That's his choice. Nothing to do with me." Right? And so he did not say that he told him. Apparently, he denied the allegation.
So he could have had a conversation with him, but he might not have. According to what he's saying, he didn't.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, could have occurred. There was anonymous sources claiming that it did occur, that he told DeSantis to
maybe he had a conversation with him about something else, and and people assumed that that's what he was talking about or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a possibility. But at the time, Lara seemed to be ready for the appointment and said she would welcome the opportunity. So she actually seemed to be interested in being appointed to Senator of Florida. And she even stepped down, as I said, the RNC co-chair. She was the co-chair of the Republican National Convention. She stepped down in order to prepare for the possibility of becoming the Florida state senator. But then she ultimately decided to remove herself from the race as well, and gave very little reason as to why she removed herself from the race. So she backed out of that one, even though that was potentially could have been given to her, especially if Trump actually was pressuring DeSantis. I don't know if he was. I can't confirm that myself. Let us know in the comments below whether you thought he talked to DeSantis about that, or if that was just all made up.
Yes. So I just looked it up. She became the chair on March 8th, 2024. She stepped down December 9th. It's 9 months. I don't know how long people normally are the chair of the RNC, the co-chair, but that seems relatively short to me, so it seems like she was stepping down for a reason, not just, you know what I mean? Not just, well, I'm done because he won, but it could have been because Trump won and she was done. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be. So this is the question that we're kind of kicking around. So now we have Tillis stepping down, and he's the senator from North Carolina. So that's a seat that's back open. So the question is this a setup? Did he push out Tillis to potentially have Laura Trump finally take a Senate seat? So that's kind of what we're kicking around right now. So you have the fact that she's a North Carolina native and she could easily move back home to fill the Senate seat. And she is now stepping down from the RNC. She's now positioned herself to be able to take a new position. And we have not just one, but two sitting Republican senators conveniently have or are retiring amidst Laura's availability. Of course, she didn't take the Florida one, and I think that kind of throws a little bit of a wrench into the series because, like, if she just wanted a seat, why didn't she take the Florida one? But maybe they were like, well, this guy, we're going to push him out, and then she can take the North Carolina one.
Right.
I don't
That's
know.
where I'm thinking. That's where the scheming or the strategy comes into play here, because I'm like, this does feel like a plot, whether it is or not. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And I would say I'm not getting on Trump's whatever. I'm not jumping on his back here if that's what's going on. But I'm just wondering if there are conversations happening behind the closed doors where she's they said, hey, here's a spot for you, and she said, no, I want to be in North Carolina, because that's where I'm from. I'd rather be there than over here, this random state I've never lived in, and like, then they're like, okay, well, we're going to set that up for you. I wonder if that's happening. Maybe that's a little too mob bossy for Trump, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little
I don't
interesting.
know, but
I'm just looking over our the notes that Doug helped put together for us today, and he's just kind of pointing out that, like, Senator Tillis announced that he's retiring a day after this riffraff with President Trump. But it's like it could be that President Trump just wanted to push him out because he's voting no on his bill. I mean, he didn't, but he didn't try to push out Rand Paul. He hasn't tried to push out Rand Paul. Rand also voted no on his bill. And so it's sort of like, is he just trying to push him out because he's voted no? Or is he taking the opportunity to say, oh, well, this is a good opportunity for Laura. Senator Tillis apparently claimed that he's been pondering stepping down for a while. That it's even been like a joke in his office, like when he's going to retire, essentially. So it could just be coincidental, could just be good timing.
right.
I do think, obviously, since it happened a day afterwards, it's obvious that Tillis, even if he was thinking about calling it quits, it's obviously he took the opportunity.
He uses it as the excuse,
when it's like, well, I'm getting challenged for the next primary. It's just like, well, I was thinking about retiring soon anyway.
I'm not going to put up a fight.
I'm going to step down.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I guess, do you have any more thoughts about, like, if what you're thinking as far as, like, is this really a setup for Laura?
I think she's going to be the senator. I'm just going to say that. I think she's going to be the senator. Like, that's kind of a crazy guesstimation to make, but if so, we can point back to this and I can win a steak dinner or something. But but yeah, that's crazy. There's no way that these conversations haven't, some sort of conversation around where Laura Trump is going next hasn't happened behind the scenes, right? And there's no way that somebody hasn't said, whether in Trump's presence or not, in Donald Trump's presence or not, well, maybe North Carolina, like there's no way that, especially if they had heard, if it's as widespread as, Tillis is wanting to step down eventually, as widespread as being a joke in the office, then there's no way that, in my mind, that they didn't know about that. So maybe it is just good timing. And Trump's like, hey, this would be a good opportunity to do this. I'm going to give you the boot out the door since you wanted to go anyways. I don't know. And, and if that's the case, if Trump knew that Tillis was already wanting to retire and he just needed some help, then it doesn't even sound that bad.
Some motivation.
Yeah. It doesn't even sound like a nefarious plot, but it does. There's a little bit of a plot here, a little bit of a scheming going on here. But yeah, I want to talk about that side of it, because that is like, that's a big question, is like, is there anything unethical about this, or is this perfectly fine. Like,
Yeah,
like
that's
those are
that's the
that's where my
question,
brain goes.
because if she ends up taking the seat, so we already
Yeah,
have people on the left. You were saying you started seeing some headlines coming through today,
yeah,
basically talking about Laura Trump and this possibility of her taking the North Carolina seat, and
right.
decrying it as nepotism, and maybe even a little level of like unprecedented nepotism, which we'll get into. I don't think it's it may be nepotism, but it's not unprecedented. We'll put it that way.
We're not talking about
And
Neapolitan ice cream here. We're talking about
yeah,
nepotism. So we might need a definition there for people like myself.
I read a definition of nepotism right before I got on here, and I'm already blanking on it because I was like, I want to be like real. I want to sound smart and be able to like just rattle it off the exact definition of nepotism. Let's see, nepotism: favoritism shown or patronage granted to relatives, as in business. Number two, undue attachment to relations, favoritism shown to members of one's family, bestowal of patronage and consideration of relationship rather than of merit or of a legal claim. So I think that's probably the best
Yeah,
favoritism towards relatives instead of merit, right, or legality,
yeah.
especially when in relations to business or politics. So what's your first? I've got some thoughts about this, but I'm curious. What's your first thoughts about this? What's the
Well,
I know. So we were talking before. We're not really trying to like jump on Trump as like he's doing this horrible, terrible, awful thing. It's not unprecedented by any means, but I do think it's worth mentioning and talking about like, is this a bad move? Is it at least problematic to consider the
yeah.
nepotism?
And I think it gets into a more general discussion of, is nepotism always a bad thing, or is it always a good thing, or can it be bad or good?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, and I think it's a good discussion. We got some really great comments. I would go the route of, like, I guess it's Doug that's asking the question from our channel, Filibusted. Would you vote for Laura Trump as senator? And Loran, if I'm saying your name right, said yes over Tillis, sure. And I think that's the direction I would go. Is Laura Trump suited for the role? Would she do a good job? Right.
Mhm.
And I think that's like when I think about my own life, and if I'm thinking of like, well, I need somebody. Our brother-in-law just started a what is it called? A business where he
Trash removal service.
a trash removal service, a dumpster
Mhm.
business. Where he hauls these big dumpsters. Really cool, company and stuff. But anyways, so if I needed somebody to do, I needed to hire a dumpster for a few days. For some reason, like I would call him.
Mhm.
And why is that? Well, number one, he's my brother-in-law, sure. But if I knew him to be somebody that was untrustworthy and that would not run a good business, then guess what? That would actually work against his favor because I know that about him. So I
Right.
wouldn't call him. I'd call somebody else and be like, sorry, but I know that he's hardworking, trustworthy. He's going to do a good job, you know? And so because I know him, so I think there's that aspect of it is when you're thinking of who would fit this role best, your brain goes to, well, who do I know that actually is capable and, and makes sense in this role, And so to me, it's not, you read the definition of nepotism, and part of that definition was, somebody choosing family over somebody who's more credentialed, right? Or has the
Right.
right merits. But it's like, but that's not always true. You might be calling something nepotism, but you picked the person because you knew them, but guess what? They also are credentialed and they actually deserve the role as well. So I think there's that case where there's a middle ground where it's like you picked them because you knew them, but they also fit the spot. So I think that, that could be what's happening here. I don't know a lot about Laura Trump, to be honest.
Yeah, and I don't either. I can't really. I mean, I know she's not. She's obviously not. What's it called? Inexperienced. Like she was the
Right.
co-chair for the RNC, so it's not like she's new to politics. She's coming out of nowhere. Like and just complete. Yeah, can have no involvement whatsoever with the politics, the Republican Party, and then just coming out of nowhere and being like, "All right, give me the seat," that kind of thing. I do like your point about the choosing family usually has to do with a trust situation, and that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't merit there or there is merit there one way or the other. I kind of just go for most things. I kind of just go back down to like the result. And so when it comes to like asking me generally about nepotism, well, first off, my first point would be that I don't think I think it's unavoidable. And it's not always a bad thing, because by human nature, we trust people that we know more, right? And so we're people that we're around that that we know more. And then when we're talking about democracy and politics, you have there's a filtering system that happens where, you have kingmakers like Trump, who people call him a kingmaker. He can anoint somebody. He can say, hey, this person, that person. But at the end of the day, we're in a democratic, a representative republic system, and we also have primaries for, the Republican Party. And so it's not going to be, he's appointed this person as the senator, and now they're the senator. They're only going to be the senator if they get the votes, right? And so it's still up to the people of North Carolina. It's not like he has godlike power and can just say, hey, this is the person. Obviously that gives her a great boost. But if she really was completely unqualified or is a terrible candidate, that's the people of North Carolina that get to decide that. And so when it comes to democracy, you still see a lot of nepotism, but there's a balance there, because the individuals still have the ability to vote. And so for me, it doesn't really come down to like, oh, did this person just choose this person because of their family member or not? It really comes down to the results of, is it good? Is it right? In the results of how well are the people doing it. Like if there's a family that's in power, I'll out myself here. I'm a little bit of a monarchy sympathizer. I'm not like married to democracy, because I think of terms of results. So if democracy is having great results, that's awesome. But like when you talk about like families being having legacy, or families being we'll talk about the maybe the Kennedy family in a little bit or whatever. When you talk about families and stuff like that, it's not about is it the most democratic thing that they chose a family member and then that person became the next president or whatever. For me, it always goes back to the results of is there good results being done? Is there bad results being done? And yeah, it's just like, people like to act like democracy is good in itself just because everyone gets a vote, or like it's equal, that everybody has the same amount of chance to become president or something, and that makes it like a good system. It's like, that's not what makes it a good system. It makes it a good system if it has good results. Same as like monarchy is not bad just because one family is in charge. Monarchy is only bad if the family is acting in a way where they take away everyone's natural human rights and do horrible atrocities. But that's just my opinion as a little bit of a monarchy sympathizer. Again, I look back to the results. If the people that are being chosen based off of trust, again, democracy is a popularity contest. By definition, it's not about merits. And I'm not trying to bash democracy here, because it's not a terrible system. But when people are voted into office, it's not necessarily because they're the best candidate. It's not necessarily because of merit. It's usually because of those human nature like things of, I trust this person. They seem reputable. So when you have somebody like Trump come out and say, hey, this person's my family member, but they're great, and people that like Trump, they're more likely to pick them because they trust them. And that's just kind of human nature. There's no way you can really get around that. And so I guess that's my rant, is like, I just don't think that's the worst thing ever. I just don't think it is. Again, it comes down to what is the person doing when they get in office. And if they're doing terrible things, then just vote them out.
I agree with you to an extent.
You can disagree. You can disagree with my whole premise. I don't care.
No. I agree with you to an extent. I think the only problem is what democracy protects people from, and obviously you said you're after results, not necessarily the system of quote unquote fairness or whatever, which I kind of agree with that. But at the same time, what democracy protects people from when it comes to the monarchy side of things, or dictatorship or whatever it is that, okay, if you've got a good family in power, that's great, that actually wants to protect people. But then you get one guy in there who doesn't care about people, or anything, and human rights or anything. And now he gets all his cronies in there and he puts anybody, and it's all corrupt and it's all bad. And it's very hard to get out of that system, and I think on the side of democracy, at least we have a silver lining, which is, well, then the next presidential election is going to come up 4 years from now, and we can get out from under Biden. I mean, anyways,
I almost missed that. Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and that is the dangers of authoritarianism. It's great if the family in power who's the super powerful family in power is really representing the people and doing really good things on behalf of the people. But yeah, once it starts to turn bad, if you don't have a way to unseat those people, then you're in a really bad situation really quickly. Again, going back to since I'm just throwing this in here because I think it's interesting. So Laura Trump stepped down as the RNC. And just to throw out a little bit again of like when I talk about some of my qualms that I have with modern day like quote unquote democracy, I'm just going to throw this out here. So the recent Democrat chair, the DNC chair, is a guy named David Hogg. I think his last name's pronounced Hogg. I don't think it's Hogue. Could be saying it wrong. So he was just recently outed because of political infighting on the Democratic Party side. But he was like a young guy who was really young guy. I think, gosh, maybe even younger than me, and like 20s or whatever. But anyways, so he's a young guy who became the Democratic chair. You can go look him up or whatever, and why he got ousted by his own party because he wasn't in for very long. So you mentioned like how long do people stay the chair of parties? I was like, well, if you're David Hogg, not very long. I think it's like a few months. Anyway, so he got ousted for internal political reasons I'm not going to go over. However, before he got ousted, he was attempting to appeal to men. So, we've probably seen a lot of headlines about the Democratic Party having a problem with men trying to get the male vote and trying to court the male vote now because they're like, we lost men on the last election. We don't know what we're doing. How do we appeal to men? So he tried to appeal to men, and you might be shocked by this. You might be shocked by how he attempted to appeal to men. I'll be done here in a second. It's a small tangent, but his attempt, I think he did this on Bill Maher's show. This was his attempt to appeal to men from the Democratic Party side. He was warning about the Republican Party trying to ban abortions. And he was trying to appeal to men and saying, hey, men, you want abortions, right? Because you need abortions because you all like to do one-night stands. That's what he said for the male side. And the other thing that he was warning about was Republicans want to ban adult content. There's a name for adult content. I'm not going to say on this channel in case it gets censored, but it rhymes with corn, the food, in case everybody I'm sure knows what I'm talking about, in which Republicans have floated ideas of banning that kind of stuff in the past. And so that was his appeal to men, essentially. Wow. And that was when I heard that, I was just like, this is why the Democratic Party is losing so terribly and is really losing men, because real men want to build civilizations, right? They want to build good civilizations. They want good results. They don't want to use their quote unquote freedom of, we live in a free society where we can vote for whatever we want and do whatever we want. And then we end up using our freedom for the most destructive instant gratification that's out there. That's humanly possible, right? Especially the abortion side. And the fact that he was touting that as like, that's why the Democratic Party is pro men, is for men. It's just one of those things that's just like, man, I cannot
appealing to that selfish like nature. Yeah, like you can be as selfish as you want to be over here, like
right.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And that's part of why when I say I'm a little bit like skeptical about some of the results of democracy, it's not really democracy, so to speak. It really just comes from the sense of like that rampant liberalism where
that
like
flies.
The most important thing is for people to do whatever they want to do. And it's just like, it's just so empty. It's not what men really want. We want to build great societies and great civilizations and great families and great businesses, great cities. We don't want to live at the individual atomized level where we're all like, well, I'm just doing my little thing that I want to do and it happens to be awful and bad, but the government can't tell me I can't do it, kind of thing.
Yeah. So it flies in the face of everything that calls up real manhood out of a male. Like you watch a war film where somebody dies taking a bullet for somebody else. You watch a family movie where a dad sacrifices so his kids can have a better life. It's like, these are the things that make you go, oh, I want to be a man like that, like, and that's the best version of myself, it's self-sacrifice and not thinking of myself only, thinking outside myself, and it's like, and that is how you build a culture of legacy. That's how you build a culture that's positive, that's going to last, and is going to actually help the next generation, and is going to promote good values and good, and it's like, it's going to be strong from the inside out, not but a culture that says instant gratification, you get whatever you want whenever you want it, and it's really just about you feeling good in the moment and nobody else can tell you what to do. It's like, that's the opposite, and it's, man, that is so sad to me. I don't know, that's sad.
Yeah,
it's like, it doesn't call you up higher, and it doesn't call you to any greater purpose other than fulfilling your sensual desires. That's it, like, but there's like every man and women too, but but it's like, I'm speaking from the perspective of a man, and obviously we're talking about this guy that's trying to appeal to men in the Democratic Party, but at the same time, it's like, man, it's like, you want to be called up to a higher purpose than just making myself feel good for one night.
Yeah, for sure. And
It's like,
tying it back
man,
to what we've been talking about here with the discussion with nepotism and
yeah,
Lord Trump is it's just one of the many reasons why, when they're presented with this kind of thing, it feels like we're kind of people end up arguing over like, the abstract like not abstract. It's like the political procedure of like, well, what's the right ethical political procedure? Like, can a president, be kind of nepotistic and like, raise up one of their daughter-in-laws to take a position or whatever? Like, is that right? Is that ethical? Is it okay? And again, why I always go to like, well, what I care more about anything else is the results and then the
mhm,
culture being presented. Because if the culture being presented by like the Trump legacy, Trump dynasty is more in line with something that's actually good and life-bringing and growing, and as a Christian, I would say even like just somewhat biblical values or Christian values, something that's truly good and wholesome, then I would say it's again like I'm not antagonistic against the idea of nepotism, whether it's on the right or on the left. I'm not one of those people to be like, well, it's okay when we do it, but it's not okay when you guys do it. I'm just more
right,
like, I don't care. You can nominate your daughter-in-law, go for it. What I really care about is what are the values that they're pushing and what's the end result going to be from the
yeah,
policies that they're pushing. And then thankfully we do live in a democracy that has some of those checks against the worst cases of nepotism, where it's like, well, my nephew who's an idiot and is super corrupt, he gets to be in charge of the banking industry because I'm the king and I get to say it. It's just like, well,
oh
that's
my gosh,
that's the like, all right, democracy, you got something there.
I
You
thought you were
keep the
about to talk
worst
about
things like
Gavin
that
Newsom.
from at least not being correctable when they do occur, because it still occurs even in democracy. It still occurs, but
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, I think the word nepotism just sounds bad, and so people can frame it that way. Like it's the evil nepotism. Watch out! And it's like, hey, buddy, okay? I don't know what happened, bud.
well, while you're checking on your son, let me just remind the our incredible audience today about all the fun nepotism that we have had throughout the ages. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here was a MSNBC article calling out Laura Trump the potential of taking the Florida seat as
Mm,
nepotism. She's going to fit into the Senate's history of nepotism and corruption. So it's talking about a political history of nepotism and corruption. Not necessarily all of these are corruption, but definitely a lot of nepotism. These are just some fun notes here. We have, of course, just pointing out the fact that this is not unprecedented. Not saying all these accounts are good. Again, I already gave my whole spill about nepotism. And the more I say it, the less it sounds like a word. So I'm just going to keep saying it until it doesn't sound like anything.
yep.
But let's talk about the Bush dynasty just real quick. So that's a one everyone should be familiar with. Started with George Bush Sr. And then, of course, let's see, led off obviously to his son, George W. Bush, and a lot of other people too. Attorney Republican George P. Bush, former Governor Jeb Bush's son. The Bush nepotism certainly sets an even larger precedent than what we were seeing with the potential now. So much larger precedent there as far as like the Bush dynasty. 2 presidents, 1 governor, one Texas State Land Commissioner. So that's what we're looking at there. And then, of course, we have the Clinton dynasty. I think this one's hilarious. We have Vox. Vox, is that how you pronounce them? I usually just read it. I don't usually say it. Vox. Hillary
Well, I
Clinton
don't
is
know.
part of a dynasty. That's usually how glass ceilings get shattered, and so they are supporting nepotism in this case because she's female, and of course this is all old hat at this point. But so you had, of course, the Clinton dynasty. Bill Clinton was president for two terms. Then Hillary Clinton was allowed to be the U.S. Secretary of State. She was also a senator. And then let's see here. Their daughter is less directly involved in politics and more involved in the Clinton Foundation. And so that's just, if you guys know about the Clinton Foundation, the way that people will get into politics, and then they are able to make these foundations where they basically supercharge their how much money they can make, and from like speaker fees and all this other kinds of stuff, right? And then
I've heard of that.
and then
It's
they
crazy.
give your family members positions on boards and all that kind of stuff or whatever. So they got a little bit going on there. Biggest one probably that I'm aware of is the Kennedy dynasty, otherwise referred to as Camelot. Right. So we've known this one for years, from JFK to RFK. They've been involved in politics for decades. And last but not least, we have the Gavin Newsom being referred to as from Nancy Pelosi as her favorite nephew, which is now her favorite former nephew. And there's a little bit more of a distance between them. But Nancy Pelosi is also the daughter of a former, now deceased Congressman, Thomas D. Alessandro. So she was the daughter of a congressman. Now she's a congressman. Her favorite nephew became governor of California. I don't know how he's kept his seat there in California, but man, that guy can talk himself out of anything.
Oh my gosh.
I love the fake news that was the other day when somebody posted a video of the LA riots burning down California, or burning down LA, and Governor Newsom called it out, and he was like, this is a picture from 2020. This isn't a picture from 2025. This is fake news. And somebody commented, they're like, you're right. This is a picture from 2020. Thanks for pointing out that this is from the other time that you allowed LA to burn to the ground.
Oh my
because
God.
of riots when you were, that you weren't able to keep under control. So, not a good thing to call out on his regard. It's like, this is from the last time that we had.
Did I let this happen?
That I allowed this to happen.
When you mentioned corrupt nephews earlier, I thought you were talking about Gavin Newsom. So, but obviously,
oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot I mentioned corrupt nephews. I don't know, maybe he makes the list. But again, this is all based off of results, because it's just like, why is I'm like calling out again? I wouldn't call it Gavin Newsom's. I don't care if he's somebody's nephew. Our producer gave me all these notes, which are great notes. Doug did an awesome job. But me personally, I don't care. I don't care if he's somebody's son, somebody's nephew. I care about what he's done to California, and he's done a terrible job.
He needs to leave because of what he's done.
Not because
he's Pelosi's nephew. That has nothing to do with it.
This is a nice little chart. This California Matters article has here that's like connecting family members. Might be a little small to read, but it's kind of cool. You can see how nepotism works. Different family members and relations and all kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess I'm a little bit of a fence sitter when it comes to nepotism. I call it out when it has bad results, but it
can be good, can be bad type of perspective.
That's my take on it.
I think there's something here, and as soon as I started like diving into this story, I really think there's something here that has to do with Trump recognizing the fact that he started this MAGA movement, mostly him, some other players at the same time are kind of getting on the same board, same train, but mostly Trump, and he's going to be in office for 3 more years, and then that's it, and so there's this idea of, whoops, my bad, I dropped you out. There's this idea of, legacy with not just Trump himself and his family, but that movement and like what he started. And I think there's something there where it's like he's recognizing like, I'm only going to be here for 3 more years. This is what we started doing. This is what I'm trying to do, and I believe in a lot of ways he's obviously helping the United States and has helped us, not done everything perfect, not done everything right, but at the same time, I think he's done a lot of good, generally speaking. And so that is going to stop with him or die with him unless somebody else picks up that torch. And I think there is some of that probably sentiment there. Now that's a lot of conjecture. That's me putting myself in his shoes and going, but I think if that's true, and if that's what that's the direction he's starting to think, then I think we're going to see more of this. Honestly, I think we're going to see Trump helping to get more people situated where he wants them to go over the next couple of years. So that, and I don't think as long as they're good people, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it really depends on each person and each position that's being filled.
I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Obviously, we didn't talk very much specifically about Lara Trump herself and her credentials and whether or not she would be a good senator or not. So I'd love to hear people's takes. If you could put that in the comments as we wrap up this live stream, let us know in the comments below the video what you think about Lara Trump, as well as what you think about nepotism in general. We might have a little bit of a controversial take, and both of us being a little bit like, it's all right. Well, but I guess, we also...
It's obviously been...
We have a mixed take.
It's been framed as super, super, super bad.
Sure.
Like in every way. But at the same time, it's like, well, no, I'm just thinking back to the thing I said at the very start, which was, okay, who do you put into a position? It's the person you trust to get that job done. Who do you know? Who you can only trust people that you know. Right. You can't just like, you can pick someone based off their credentials. Yes. But when you know that you can trust them to get the job done too, on top of those credentials, then that adds another factor. So it's always going to weigh into it. It's always going to play in. It's just going to be part of how politics works. It's going to be how part of how business works and how life works. So I think there's that to be considered.
Absolutely. Nepotism is bad until you're the person who has to choose who goes where, and you suddenly realize how much trust, because I've seen, like studies and stuff where it's just like when it comes to performances for business and all those kinds of things, you try to measure people's metrics, but at the end of the day, trustworthiness actually comes out on top of pretty much everything else, both in politics and in business. And it's like, well, how do you get that level of trustworthy? That person is actually that trustworthy. And it's like, well, you can only really do it by knowing the person. And again, that's why I'm not completely against nepotism, because if you're by your relations and knowing somebody, whether you're friends with them or whatever, is actually allowing you to be like, this person's trustworthy. That's why I'm nominating them. And as I already stated before, because we have to vote on these things, it kind of weeds out
there's a level of
aspects of it, right? The absolute worst aspects of it can be weeded out because they have to be voted on and approved by the people anyway. So it's not like the North Carolinians are getting their the hood pulled over their eyes or something like that. Like they get to see the primaries and they get to vote and decide who they really want at the end of the day anyways.
Yep. Doug says it's only bad when Trump does it, according to the left. So maybe we can close with that, unless you have any final thoughts.
No, I'm good. Thank you all for joining in, and come back tomorrow afternoon, 2 or 3 p.m. Central Standard Time here in the US of A. I think probably Troy, you'll be giving us some more headlines. Peace out.
See y'all next time.